to the Johnson City Government Information Channel on Comcast. Oh, we're on Charter Cable Channel 192 and Comcast Cable Channel 17 to this live telecast of the July 9, 2019 Johnson City Regional Planning Commission meeting. This broadcast will be rebroadcast on Friday, July 12, 2019 at 12 p.m. This time we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome. And we'll start with our invocation and Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Cooper.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Lord, please bring a spirit of cooperation, collaboration, and wisdom to this meeting so that we all may work together and make decisions that are in the best interest of not only today but the citizens of this community for the future. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is indeed approval of tonight's agenda. Do we have any motions?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda as written.
Motion to approve. And a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is approval of meetings for the minutes for the June 11, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting minutes are approved. We have no old business tonight, so we'll go ahead and launch into tonight's new business. The first item for new business is consideration of the Weaver Property Subdivision Final Plat. Mr. Ryder, thank you. Can I stop you for one moment, please? I wanted to welcome our two new commissioner members. I apologize that I didn't do this earlier. I want to welcome Mr. Chris Dagenhart on the end here and Mr. Benjamin Whitfield. Pleasure. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, Chairman, Commissioners, before you is a request for final property subdivision, final plat subdivision approval for the Weaver property subdivision. This is a 4.98 acre lot that adjoins Hairtown Road. It's a county property that's within the Johnson City Planning Region jurisdiction. Property is owned by Philip Weaver. He intends to subdivide this property into three 1.66 acre lots. The county zoning is R1 low density residential. The property abuts a county road. Water is provided by the town of Jonesboro. The lots require septic. As you can see here, TDEC has already stamped approval that it meets subsurface sewage disposal. Site distances for the driveways have been verified by engineering and approved, and the driveway distances meet the American Association of Highway Transportation Officials. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions for staff? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have anybody here wishing to speak for or against this subdivision plat approval? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public hearing and open up for discussion on the commission. And any motions?
Move we approve.
A motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
and Chairman Zions.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be consideration of the Lark Street Section 1 subdivision final plat.
Chairman, Commissioners, before you is a request to consider to approve a final plat for a piece of property on West Walnut Street. That is the property that currently has the Boys and Girls Club. It's owned by the city, so therefore the city is the applicant on this applicant for this subdivision. The purpose is to create a right-of-way for extension of Lack Street and connecting it down to West Market Street. This is the plat, the lot as it currently lays out, and the applicant proposes to split this into create three lots. One of the lot appearing here as a kind of a flag lot will connect to the old Food City property, and the developer of this site will eventually in future have access to this new road in order to reduce traffic congestion on State of Franklin and West Market Street at that intersection. Staff has reviewed this plat. It meets both zoning requirements and subdivision regulations. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you very much, Hassan. Do we have any questions for staff? Is it good? Okay. And seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up for discussion. For public comment, is there anybody here wishing to speak for or against this final plat approval? Not what we came for today. All right. Thank you all very much. We'll go ahead and close public hearing and open up for discussion on the board. Any discussion? No. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Lark Street section final plat as written.
Okay, we have a motion to approve as written and a second. Seeing no further discussion, we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Chairman Zayas.
Yes,
Motion approved.
thank you. Third item on the agenda is to consider the Brummett annexation at 0 Highland Church Road.
Chairman, Commissioners, this is a request to annex.
One moment, we have.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. I need to recuse myself from this conversation and interaction. I have a relationship with the Brummer family, so I probably do not need to participate.
Fantastic. So we'll consider Commissioner Calhoun recused from this discussion and the voting.
All right, this is a request to annex 51.43 acres of a 68.02 acre lot that adjoins Boone Station Road and Highland Church Road. The annexation is requested by the property owner, Sam Brummett, and it adjoins the city limits. Fiscal impact analysis has been based off of a 94-lot, single-family development. The total net fund estimate of $493,000 and $493,427. The plan of services, you can see there, here's the property. You can see in blue, you have the water lines, and the brown, the sewer lines. Water is currently available. City services will be extended by June 30th of 2020. We have the current zoning on the left of the screen and the future land use map on the right-hand side of the screen. The applicants requested R2B low-density residential zoning, which allows single-family development with a minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet. The R2B zoning is compatible with the current zoning on the property. You can see other single-family zoning districts here with the R2As, and it's compatible with the and consistent with the future land use map as well. You can see all this yellow here. This is calling for this area to be developed for residential purposes. Zoning matrix highlights similarities and differences between the proposed R2B's zoning and the current Washington County agricultural zoning. As the big takeaway here is, though the current zoning is agricultural, you can see that there are a great deal more commercial uses that could be developed as it's currently zoned that wouldn't be permitted under the proposed city zoning. Staff's recommending approval of the annexation, the plan of services, and the assignment of the R2B zoning district.
Question for you, Will. Just for the benefit of everyone, could you briefly explain the difference between R2A and R2B and R2 zoning?
Lot size.
Okay.
Lot size. And I can give you specific numbers.
And that's going to kind of lead into my follow-up question. I'm assuming if this, well, we obviously don't have a subdivision or a plat for how lots or anything are going to look on this yet. But if we have 51 acres and you're assuming 94 lots, and that's how the financial analysis was calculated, am I correct to assume that that's about a half acre per lot?
Yeah, and to answer your first question, the lot size in the R2A is 12, R2 would be 15,000 square feet. R2A is 12,000, R2B is 9,000, and the R2C is 6,000. Now, I believe that many of the lots will probably be more than the minimum of 9,000 square feet. Now, we do have a potential preliminary layout of what this development will look like. And you can see here, these are the single-family units. This is the All right. You can see this is the part of the property here that would be annexed by the city, or that he's requesting to be annexed by the city. These are the 16 so acres that would remain in the county. So with that in mind, you can see here that he might develop a PUD, patio home type scenario on the property that would remain in the county. And then here's sort of a potential look of what the single-family development would look like.
And I realize those lots vary in size tremendously, but how do they compare overall to the surrounding properties that are in the city limits? Like the ones we adjacent to?
Well, they would have to be of comparable size, because the surrounding zoning districts, let me go back to the current zoning. You have here's the property here, and there's a budding R2A. So these lots could be 3,000 square feet greater than these, and the same over here. But they'll be a little bit larger than the typical lots in the RP2.
Okay.
RP2 lot size is actually a good bit smaller, isn't it? Like
Yes.
4,000? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's kind of a transition, if you will, between the two.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is between the R2A and the RP2. And then this is even smaller down here, because this is RP5 to the south.
One of the things I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is the organized and orderly progress of development in this area. You can see where to the northeast the city is already reaching. That's part of the city.
Yes,
And
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so my concern is I like the patio homes in the PUD, though it looks nice, but I'm just concerned that this, in an organized, orderly fashion, we may not be proceeding that way by allowing development to occur around it that could eventually turn into city. There's no reason to expect that it wouldn't. And yet we could have this small island of county that's not there. It just doesn't seem like an orderly progression as far as development goes, and that's one of the things I'm a little uncomfortable with. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, from the staff's thoughts on it. And the other thing is do we have the option of recommending to City Commission that they go ahead and annex the entire property? That would be how we would look at it.
Well, I'd first say that of course, just that this is the request that we have before us, and with the annexation laws, that it has to be requested by the property owner. It has to adjoin the city limits. So from a land use perspective, it makes sense it calls for residential development in this area, and the zoning, the requested zoning is appropriate. So why would we not annex? And that's basically your question. And that one would be contiguity. And under that annexation law, further annexation has to adjoin the city limits. So when you look to the northeast, which is here, the property owner of this actually lives in this house here, and he's not requesting annexation of that lot. So
It's
I'm
come to my
flipping back.
attention recently that they may have rescinded the contiguity requirement within the last year.
Correct. This lot right here, this is where the property owner resides. He's not requesting annexation. Here's the portion that fronts Boone Station Road, where you start to lose that contiguity. So you wouldn't have it anyways, even if we were able to annex this, because the property owner at that house has not requested annexation. So that presents a problem of being able to annex further to the northeast, perhaps, going back to I'm sorry, apologize for bouncing around between the maps, but there is the potential that because these other properties on the other side of the property owner do adjoin the city limits here and then across Boone Station Road here and so on, it still could expand northeast. However, if that other property remains in the county, then you're correct. It's going to be enveloped, and you're going to have a small pocket within the county.
What is the county zoning around?
This property right here is zoned A1, and these properties up here are zoned A1 as well. And then I think, of course, there's the financial aspect of that there'd be more revenue generated from annexing the entire property. As far as the second part of your question, which I believe was, what are your options? Could you repeat the second part of your question?
Curious if it was in our purview to recommend consideration of annexation of the entire parcel rather than a portion of it. Of course, it has to come at the property owner's request, understand that. If they were to request the entire thing, that would be...
Well, I suppose you could deny it. You could deny it, and they might come forward with a request to annex the entire property, or you could deny it, and it could move ahead to the city commission anyways without the recommendation of the planning commission. A song might have more insight on other options.
The recommendation of the Planning Commission could recommend denial and state its reason for it. For example, the concern on contiguity that you've noted, the cost of extending services relative to the revenue becoming even within a specific time frame. Those are all different elements you could consider. In terms of it going to the city commission, the applicant will have to request that the entire property be annexed.
Exactly.
And if he were to add even 1 square inch to what we currently have, it must come back before planning commission, even if we were to add 1 square inch.
Thank you. I appreciate the input.
And in front of the city commission, you may recommend denial, and the city commission may still proceed, and it's a recommendation, they may still proceed, but they will have to basically kind of consider each of the reasons you've given for not approving it and then override it, basically.
Just wanted to look at it carefully from all aspects of what the options were, and just for education, not that I'm advocating for anything in particular. From the standpoint of plan of services agreement, the sewer plan has already been planned to extend along this street for planning for future development over quite a time. This sewer, just to be clear, and I think in everyone's mind, is not being built or developed just specifically for this property. This is part of a planned services extension up the road, correct? Am I correct in understanding that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's kind of, you can say it's a shared cost scenario.
Very nice.
Where the different properties will share in that cost.
Thank you very much, Asong. Does anybody else have questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys. At this time, we'll go ahead and open up for public comment. Does anybody here wish to speak for or against the Brummett annexation? Still nobody.
There's going to be a biggie coming here.
Thank you all very much for being here again and waiting for us.
I I'm Sam Brown, I'm the property owner.
Can you go ahead and approach the bench for us? We'd love to hear from you.
Of course, I am.
All right. If you'll just please give us your name and your address again, please, sir, just for the record.
Good evening, I'm Sam Brown, I am the property owner making this request.
Yes, sir.
And we are, as you said, requesting that.
So you're speaking for it.
Speaking for it currently.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
time. Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open up for discussion on the commission.
Based in our pre-meeting, if I recorded correctly, there was a possibility that we could defer until the property would be subdivided into city and county parcels. In other words, if we choose to defer this and not to act on it tonight, is it likely that this proceeds forward into the county and that it becomes officially subdivided into 2 parcels, after which time the property owner would come back and request that we are only annexing the 1 parcel? Did I understand that correctly?
I think that's one option that we have, and the question there is this, the chicken or the egg. Would he want to subdivide it if he knew he wasn't going to get the annexation or for? Which one is contingent upon the other? So we start trying to figure out which one to put first, and I'm not sure. Ideally, it's cleaner to have the city and the county lines, meet on a property line, but it's not unheard of to have a property split, and that does happen. So I would imagine that the way that they're going to develop it, it's in their interest to go ahead and proceed with the subdivision as they expect, parceling the way they expect, not necessarily subdivision. But that was my thought when I heard that. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there was
logically I would
any
change it.
benefit to us choosing to act in that manner versus choosing to.
It's a good thought process for cleanliness, but I can't figure out why, for me, it would make a big difference to delay it.
Yeah, what's the downside for us proceeding and approving or disapproving for us?
From a
Well,
go ahead.
I think with what I understood, the downside is if we did proceed and then for some reason the development actually fell through, what we would have would be, again, a parcel of land that was partially in the city, partially in the county.
Yeah.
And we would really be adding to the possibility of creating a donut hole when additional annexation requests come in the future. So that would be the biggest downside that I could see. So I don't know if that's a large enough concern to act one way or the other. That's why I'm picking y'all's brains.
And the city, quotation mark, owns Boone Station Road?
We don't have to have continuous annexation anymore either, which kind of makes some of this a bit of a moot point on some of these things. I want to answer your question on the Boone Station. We want him to answer it. But we don't have the requirement for contiguous annexation as the new law came into effect a few years ago, and I wasn't aware of that, frankly, until tonight that had been removed. So by landowner's request, non-contiguous properties can now be annexed in. We just can't do it without the landowner's request. So that is an option. That's what I found saw a finger. That's what I learned.
There are conditions under which that applies.
Okay.
So not in all cases. It has to be requested by the property owner. If we are annexing it to provide public services, let's say we're annexing the property to build a fire station, it has to be for some public use, then the city could go ahead and do that. If it's requested by the property owner to build, let's say this subdivision, 50 lot, 60 lot subdivision, the third element about it, which is one of the most important, is we will have to enter into an interlocal agreement with the county on who is going to provide services to all the other properties along the road getting into that property that you're dealing with.
Which in this case, it's already figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you. It's cleared up now. Appreciate the points. Any further discussion
Yeah,
on?
I'd like a little bit of clarity from the rest of the commission on the fiscal impact, and it may have a question for staff. Our initial and recurring net fund estimates are the same. And so if you could speak to that, it seems like the difference may be in the license and permits, which would, if you can give a little clarity on, that would be building permits from the individual.
Well, I think the biggest difference in what generally creates a difference from the initial and the recurring is that there's initial revenue from sewer and water taps, which at this time, we don't have a cost estimate on of
Okay.
what that initial
Okay.
price would be. But the initial, depending on whatever those figures turn out to be from the water and water and sewer department, your initial would be higher
Okay.
than the total.
So the
net
227, what rolls up to 227?
227.
The license and permits. 227,000, I'm sorry. Just a little
Revenue.
unclear.
Second line under annual revenue license permits.
The license and permits. What is that? Yeah.
In the per capita multiplier method, which we use in calculating this, basically, you're saying for the revenue that the city gets in an entire year, each citizen in the city contributes a certain amount to that revenue. For the entire cost of money that the city spends in a year to run Johnson City, each citizen brings in a certain cost or bears a certain cost to that. So one of the sources of the city's revenue in its general fund is licenses and permits. That has to do with developing this project. It has to do with other improvements once you have the house built and all of that. When we take the total population that this site is going to generate, and then we say, what will each person
Right.
bring in? That's what that amount is for. It's per capita.
You take the city census, and then you're dividing times the total fees collected and dividing by 216, which is your estimate of the population
For the
of the
total
development.
population
And
that
that's
is-
how, and so that's an ongoing,
That's an
recurring
ongoing,
source of
yeah.
revenue.
And they may
Okay.
be doing that not in that specific address, but in their habitation in the city,
In
period.
this- Yes.
Okay,
That's helpful.
thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Good eye. Any further questions or considerations?
All right, seeing none, I'm going to attempt a motion for you then.
Okay.
And I believe we need to make this as three separate motions. So I'll start with the first, and I move that we approve the annexation
Okay.
into the city limits of this
Be
property.
our first motion, okay?
Second.
Second, do we have any further, I guess contingent upon the approval of motions number 2 and 3? Let's do the- I guess how do we want to make sure that if we do one, we're going to trigger 2 and 3. Do we need 3 separate motions for this, Preston? Okay, all right.
And do they all have to be tied together?
I don't think so. We can go one at a time.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any further discussion on the motion on the floor with a second to accept this annexation into the city as requested? No? Okay, please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes?
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Calhoun has recused, and Chairman Zayons.
Yes.
Motion of annexation is approved.
Thank you very much. On to another annexation regarding plan of services.
Yes, the second would be approval of the plan of services.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, go ahead and please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes?
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun has recused, and Chairman Zayons.
Yes,
Motion, plan of services are approved.
thank you.
And then a final motion of the R2B zoning for this property.
Yes, ma'am, have a motion?
Second.
And a second again from Commissioner Williams. Go ahead and call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun recused, and Chairman Zidons.
Yes.
Zoning approved.
Thank you. I want to thank the staff for helping us, educating us along that. Those are nice things to go through because we learn more as we look and gather information and make better decisions. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if you would, staff, if you would, please just advise when this would be going to the City Commission for the first reading.
This would be first Thursday in August would be the first reading.
August 1st, yeah.
And then the third Thursday in August will be the second reading and public hearing, which is the 15th. And then the third reading will be the first Thursday in September, which is the 5th.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, our next item on the agenda is to consider the Landy Midway annexation at 3621 West Walnut Street.
Chairman, Commissioners, before you is a request to consider the annexation of approximately 6 acres piece of property on West Walnut Street. This has been requested by the property owner. It's called a Landy Midway annexation. It adjoins the current city limits, both to the east, to the west, and to the south. To the west and to the south, that's where you have the Sunny Slopes subdivision, and all of that is in the city. The property owner also owns these 3 lots that are currently zoned R4. So he owns all of this property. And he owns this and he's requesting that these be annexed into the city. This is the site as it currently looks. At this time, it has a single-family house on it. But as you can see, it's a deep lot. This is quite close to the road. It's a deep lot. And he intends to construct condominium single-family residential PUD type development here. I will show you a prototype of what it intends to be as we move forward. Water is already available to this property along West Walnut Street. Sewer is not available. However, when the city annexed these 3 lots 9 years ago in 2010, the plan of services included the extension of this sewer line up to that property line. In which case, the cost for this extension is already included in the annexation of this property. Consequently, staff did not include it in the calculation for this particular annexation. It will be the responsibility of the property owner subsequently to extend it into this property. So the city will just bring it up to the property line. Extend it into the property itself will be the property owner's responsibility. All other services provided by the city will be in accordance with general city policy. The net revenue for this estimated recurring will be $79,376. Initial will be $175,876. The difference originates from water and seawater fees, essentially. Based on what he intends to construct in here, with a request for an R4 zoning district, he could go up to 60, tends to do 60 dwelling units, and that calculation is based on the 60 dwelling units. In terms of zoning, the property is surrounded to the east by, there's a single-family house, this house, which is currently up for sale, and it's in the county, around that small area, that's in the county. And then all of this zone R4 is in the city for medium density residential. To the north, single-family houses, all of them are zone R1, low density residential in the county. To the south, it's the Sunny Slopes subdivision, single-family residential development, zone R2 in the city. West, the same single-family residential some of it in the city, and the clear areas are all in the county. Single-family residential development. To the west, southwest, southeast, that is where we have the Washington County Midway property. This with the ball fields and the training area for teachers and the rest. That's what we have got in that area. And this property is kind of in a node. Why the residential developments, for example, in the Sunny Slope subdivision are further away from West Walnut Street. This piece of property adjoins West Walnut Street, and it's close to this intersection, and as such is in a nodal area. This is this intersection that we're talking about, where you have the Midway Market. Looking at it right now, it's more like a duplex. I think in the past, it was probably like a neighborhood business. But right now, it functions more like a residential duplex.
Is Walnut considered at this point an arterial street or collector?
It's an arterial street.
Thank you.
The future land use map designates this property for residential development. And he's proposing to do residential development. This is a prototype. When we put out the sign out there, send notices to the property owners, I received several calls, and so I had to call the property owner in and say, we need to nail this down. What really do you intend to do on this site? And he put out a couple of kind of advance in the work that they have done to develop this site. And he pulled out an example of what they will be building, which is, I think, Fenway Court. Is that? Yeah. So I had to drive out there and take the pictures for that site, which is single-family residential development essentially, but they're like PUDs. You've got 4 or 8 or 6 in this subdivision. In this particular development, you have 6 and 8 in a row. But they're all single-family, owner-occupied residential development, one level. So this is a prototype of what he intends to construct. Just as in this subdivision, you will have a buffer buffering this property. This is a level 1 buffer. The buffers this property from the adjoining single-family residential development. The developer recommends or requests the assignment of the R4 medium density residential zoning district to this piece of property. Although the overarching development around it is single-family residential development, the future land use map designates this property for residential development, which is what he intends to do on this side. The property adjoins an existing R4 zoning district.
And how is that being used again? The R4 next to it?
It's currently, part of it is vacant, and then one of it has a single-family house on it. And he owns all. He intends to tear it down in the future.
When was that zoned R4? Do we know?
This was annexed in 2010, I think.
As R4?
Yeah, as R4.
Okay.
Yeah. It adjoins an existing R4 zoning district. The comprehensive plan has a policy in it, which is that medium and high density residential developments should be located along Collector and Arterial Street. West Walnut Street is an arterial street, basically Old Jonesboro Highway, they call it. So it's not one of the local streets or a lane that we often have inside a subdivision of this nature. And the property is proximate to a node. And usually, from a land use perspective, when you get around nodes, you start having that neighborhood business, medium density residential development feel. But as you get further away from the node, it becomes more single-family developments on individual lots. The planned unit single-family residential development that he intends to build on this side will not significantly alter the character of the area. It's not the student apartment scenario, basically, that we're looking at. So staff recommends approval of the annexation, the plan of services, and the assignment of the medium density residential zoning district.
Again, would you need three different motions regarding this?
Yes,
In the
sir.
affirmative, thank you.
Will we be allowed to ask questions to this man?
No, sir, you're going to be able to approach and speak for or against in a few moments. We haven't opened up public comment yet. We're glad to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Questions for him.
This is not the forum for that. Okay, do we have any further questions for staff?
Hassan, we do not have a preliminary plat that would show, I mean, I know you showed a picture of what he is proposing. My question is, will there be a public road that will be used to access all of those single-family homes, or will there be an extended driveway?
We don't have that yet.
Okay.
We don't have that yet. It may be a public road. It may be a driveway scenario. And we depend on what we have in our regulations by that time.
Okay.
I think that's,
Thank you.
that's why we need that meeting.
Thank you.
You mentioned a buffer.
Yes, sir.
Can you go back to that, please, and just explain the buffer area and where does that fit?
On this property,
Right.
when he eventually develops this, he would need to have that level 1 buffer along this property from the road right down to here across, because all of this is single family, so it has to have that buffer. In this area where you have the Midway Materials Center, that is, his impact will be lower than that of these materials, so he will not be required a buffer just within this small strip here. But from here going up, because this is a single family, he will be required a buffer all through, right up to the road.
Really?
Yeah.
Even though it's zoned R4?
Even though the zone R4,
Because of the current use as single family?
Yes, sir. The way our code is written, it's irrespective of the zone. Whenever you have a single family development, it is considered no impact. And anybody beside it who creates any impact of any sort, you must buffer it.
Even, really? No matter what the zone is?
No matter what the zone is.
So if it
Once
was
you're a single
A1?
family. I'm
If
sorry,
it was
sir.
A1?
If you were A1 and you had a single family on it, you have to buffer it.
Wow.
Can you, for those who are here and those of us who are on the commission, can you, again, just discuss what we're talking about when we talk about having a buffer here and the general idea of going from a higher use to a lower impact and what's required in a buffer? Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because there's people here who are interested.
The buffer, in this case, he will be required to create a level 1 buffer. This is an example of a level 1 buffer. It is 15 feet wide. He has 2 options. So option 1 is 15 feet wide with a row of trees in it, evergreen, just same as this. So whether it's winter or the summer, it remains the same. And the city forester reviews the plants and the species of trees, how they have to be planted as such that at maturity, usually within 3 years, they have to all be touching each other to create a hedge, just like what we have there. And the second option is 10 feet wide. If he goes that option, then there will have to be a masonry wall, an opaque wood fence with a row of trees. And in that case, he will have to plant them maximum 6 feet apart. So, and he also reviews that to ensure that at full growth, you all have that, it creates that hedge.
Thank you.
So pretty, you're welcome.
Yes, sir. Mr. Whitfield.
It's on, to the west of the proposed area of consideration, it's county area. Is there a comparable zoning for that? Would that be similar to the R3, R2, R4? What would be a comparable zoning for those areas?
For the county,
Correct.
it's currently, in the county, it's currently zone R1, low density residential. The county is R1 and the city is R1 are basically the same.
Okay.
We-
So surrounding
we
the
are
areas,
very-
mostly R1,
Yeah.
some R2, and a little sliver of R4, approximate to the area of consideration.
So this is R1 in the county, and then this is R2 in the city. And across the road is RP3 on this side of the road, and this is R4.
And then the Midway Industries is functioning
Right now,
next to
it's,
that
yes. Yes, yes, exactly. I can do
It develops a transition.
Yes. And here is the Midway Materials Center, more of an institutional use for the county.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
There's a small parcel on the corner of the property in question,
This one.
right there. What's there?
It has this house. This is what you've got there. And as I mentioned, this is a for sale sign that is out there.
And it's in the county and it's R1?
It's in the county, it's R1.
Yes, thank you.
And Asan, you said you can, that, on that piece of property, you could put up to 60 units?
In the R4 zoning district, which he is recommending, and what he has in mind at this moment is 60 dwelling units.
So he does have in his mind somewhere about having 60 units on that piece of property?
Yeah. If he goes the R4 zoning district, he could have that 60. This is, the lot size is 6.25 acres.
R4 permits how many dwelling or units
R4
per
permits
acre?
14 dwelling units per acre. So it's 6.251, and R4 permits 14 dwelling units per acre. So he can, it's all about engineering.
Yeah.
How, if he gets an intelligent engineer who knows how to design the site. But looking at the prototype, which is single level, I don't see that going to 60 dwelling units. I don't. Realistically, I see it may be about 40, 42,
And it's on,
40, 45.
I know that the property to the east of it is R4, but is there anything close to that density around this proposed area?
As you go
that has
further
close to
south,
60 units?
as you come further closer into the
Towards
city, you have multi-family residential development, including even student apartments on
How
that.
far away from this?
Will you permit me? I will have to pull up some map here.
Sure, we'll take your time. Go ahead. We're in no hurry. If you'd like to, take some time on that while we open up the public hearing, then you can come back to it. That would be fine. Would that be okay with you?
That's fine,
Commissioner?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions of staff right now, or can we open up public comment? Is that? I heard that we have questions, and that's partly what we're here to do, is please field your questions and comments to us directly, mostly your comments, but some of those are going to spark questions in us, and then we have the opportunity again to engage staff and discuss with them, and that's how the forum works best. And we're glad to have you. Thank you all for waiting through our entire meeting, and we obviously see that you're interested and concerned. So please, we'll go ahead and open up the public comment, and whoever would like to approach the bench first, give us your name and address.
Hi, my name is William Berman. I live at 128 Silver Maple, and that's in Sunny Slopes. My understanding is that this man is planning on changing it from an R1 to an R4, which does actually allow for apartments, does it not?
It is a high-density residential. It does.
Okay, I have no problem with the annexation and bringing it into the city and getting us a little bit more in the way of taxes. I have no problem with that. But I don't see how he's going to be able to get 60 units on an acre or 40 units on an acre without going more than one story. And if we go R4, we're going to allow him to do that. And you guys are going to allow him to annex in. At the same time, we're going to be changing a zoning. I disagree. We were assured by you all last time, I don't remember how many of you were on here when we were here 4 years ago when we did this. We were assured by you all that before anything would happen with this property, you all would see to it, he would sit down with us and discuss this with us. That discussion never happened. Ask anybody who was here during that meeting. We were assured that would be. I don't know if it's a new owner or it's another owner, but I have no problem with R1. I mean, you got to do something with land. You have to. You put houses on it, single family. But I'm not in favor of apartment complexes on that. That would be right up against my property. And when I bought my property, I had vacant land behind me, and I was assured that it was R1, that it was part of the county, and that if it ever came in, it would remain R1, and we would build houses just like mine, and I wouldn't have to worry about anybody building a huge apartment complex behind me with the crime and other things that come along with that. We've enjoyed our neighborhood. I've been there for 7 years. No crime, hardly ever see a police officer ever. I would rather not have somebody building an apartment complex in my backyard. And I know they're going to say it's single family and we're going to make it pretty and we're going to put a buffer in there. What happens now and what happens in 4 years when the actual construction starts usually changes. And I'm not in favor of it. I'm not. I have no problem with an R1. If he wants to keep it at R1 and build a nice neighborhood with sidewalks and houses, I have no problem with that at all. And bring him into the city. We could use the taxes. But I don't see any real reason why we need to raise this to an R4 and allow him to do multifamily. You know, basically he's going to have them butted up against one another if you're going to put that many houses on 1 acre of land. So clearly we're not talking about houses here. We're probably talking about condos or apartments that they'll call condos that they will buy and sell as condos, and then those condo owners will rent them out to other people. I am not in favor of that.
Thank you very much.
Sure?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Yes. My name is Scott Schultz. I live at 149 Silver Maple Drive. I've lived there since February. It's my first home I purchased. I lived in Johnson City when I went to college at ETSU, and I lived in a condo. It was a single-family area, right? But that's not what happened. Those condos were bought and rented out, and it was apartments, more or less is what it was. And I then went off to law school. I came back. I wanted to get a job and pay taxes and buy a house. Part of the reason I wanted to buy that house was because living in that condominium area, it promotes a transient, ambulatory community. It's students that come and go. It's people who don't have a vested interest in that land, so they don't care as much about that land. And it's true. I would be embarrassed to have guests over because there would be a new couch on the side of the road, or there would be a new mattress on the side of the road. And before I bought this home, I was so happy to buy this home at 149 Silver Maple because the fall of 2018, there was a toilet that sat on the side of the road for, I kid you not, nearly a month. I'll say that under oath. A toilet sat on the side of the road for nearly a month. And I am terrified of this coming to the neighborhood that I just spent a bunch of money to move into. I found this home on the internet, and when I drove out there, I loved the house. The house is great. But I really fell in love with the community. It's an established community. It's beautiful. The homes are well taken care of. The people are great. We had a right to rely on the ordinances that we knew we were buying our homes in. And now it's very much going to change the nature of the community we were all relying on. The people in the Sunny Slopes community, they pay for this land. They pay taxes on this land, and they don't want this. And another point I would want to make, the pictures that we were shown here don't show the entire surrounding community. That gas station that was much further on down the road, that's not in the Sunny Slopes area. That's much further on down the road. And I believe the gentleman that was speaking for the proposed annexation and development was mentioning that on down the road there are more what you would consider classic apartments. Yes, and it is an eyesore. It certainly is an eyesore when you go on down towards Kroger. I don't want the investment I just made to go back to the exact thing that I was trying to get away from.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time being here. We'd love to hear from somebody else.
Good evening. My name's Park Smith. I live at 102 Silver Maple. We've lived there just about 2 years, and we moved from Illinois. We came here, and we almost bought a place further down by those apartments that the gentleman before me was just speaking about, and our realtor, Susan McBride, brought us to this one. It was a Willjum home before, and we're so glad that she did because we have 7 kids, but 5 still at home. And in this community, I can trust my children can drive through the whole community of Park and Sunny Slopes, and I can feel very comfortable that I don't have to watch them as closely as if I have, like the gentleman before me was saying, a transient neighbor. Through life, we all live in apartments at some point in life, and we do know that there's a difference between a vested interest in a homeowner versus a renter. But I don't know that I could have the same comfort level. So I bought, just like the gentleman before me, with good faith that this property would be one that I could raise my family. I have kids in 5 schools. I'm a taxpayer. I make a good income, pay plenty of taxes for everybody. We buy a lot of things. We buy everything local. We want to be a good lifelong citizen of Johnson City. And I tell you, if this happens, I probably will move, because I do not want this type of responsibility pushed upon me, where I have to be guarding my home, my property, and my children consistently when we do have 60 or so units that will have turnover rapidly. I've had 20 units as a renter before, and I definitely know what happens in those types of properties. I do also want to bring up a couple other things, is that I do know my property value will go down, because in the future, people, just like I made this decision to move further away from the city but still be in the city, because of some other multifamily properties that were located closer to where we looked before. The property was less there, we paid more, but I could see where other future buyers would consider it to be problematic to pay the same price that I may have paid. Secondly, the infrastructure of that street, when you have school buses and if you add more car volume, if you have 60 more families, you'll have at least 120 more cars. During certain parts of the day, that's going to cause congestion in that area. Green Pond Road, right over here on the top up by the RP3, that's an outlet over to Market. That road definitely can't handle more traffic. I mean, this is not a good place for more traffic. But I want to go even further to talk about the fact that we have a lot of water pipes breaking in that area, and the city's working in that area all the time for the last 6 months. Then I want to talk about watershed. I live at 102. It's down here on one property off of the bottom corner. Can you see it down there off Silver Maple? That area, all that water sheds into my backyard. Down at the bottom, by covenant, we have to keep our outbuildings at the end of our property. There's an outbuilding at the end of the property that could be, today it is not, but could be assaulted by additional rainfall. So I would hope that there would be plenty of watershed capturing so that it could flow at a proper flow. And then lastly, I just wanted to speak to the fact that, there's still plenty of properties on main streets. And I know this man wants to make productive income off of this property, but a street like Market would be much better for apartments. When you look at that Lark Street subdivision, that type of property, or the subdivision is projected for what we spoke about earlier, that would be a much better access road than what Walnut is. It's just not a good. These are my opinions, but I just feel very strongly about this because of the first 3 things is that I have to guard my home, my property, and my children, and it wasn't what I bought when I bought here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. So we're looking at some themes here of basically concerns for multi-level development, things being developed out of character, concerns for property development, property value, and concerns for infrastructure. So if we need to echo those themes, you might say, hey, I agree with that. Let us know in the interest of time. We want to make sure that anybody who wants to speak does have a chance to speak. Hello, sir.
Yes, appreciate the time to speak with you.
Absolutely.
My name is Scott Landy.
Yes, sir.
I'm the owner of the property as well as the potential developer. I'm hearing everything that everybody's saying, but I just want to clarify one thing, that these are not going to be apartments. These will be single-family dwellings in a planned unit development that'll be sold on an individual basis. So they're not apartments. We have 6 acres and not 1 acre. And if there's some concession I need to make as far as rezoning it or taking a look at a lower density, I'd be happy to consider that.
Thank you, Mr. Landy.
But they're not apartments. They're going to be single-family dwellings. They're going to be really well done, and they're going to be sold to individual people, and they're not going to be rental property.
Then why R4?
This is not the forum for that. Okay, we're not going to do that tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, please.
My name is Pat Kiernan. I live at 147 Sunset Circle in Sunny Slope subdivision, and I have the same objection. I've been there for over 20 years. This is not the first time they've tried to develop property next to Sunny Slopes and tried to zone it at higher density, and for the same reason, you know, I'm opposed to it. I don't mind a bit to develop the land, to see the land put to good use and more homes in there. It's just the high density rezoning is what I object to.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
My name's Gary McAllister. I live at 3635 West Walnut Street. I'm just live a few doors down where I'm also a Washington County Commissioner, and I represent this district. And I just want to echo what you've already heard. I've had a number of calls, not just from Sunny Slopes, but from the other areas, and they're concerned about possibly high density in those areas. So some people couldn't make it here tonight. I'd like to be their voice and speak for them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
First off, my name is Charles Caudle. I'm a homeowner at 165 Sunny Slopes Drive in Sunny Slopes. And I want to say thank you all for allowing us to stand up and say our 2 cents worth. There are a number of questions I have about this proposal. Under the current R4 piece of property that's been zoned, just the nature of the property, the sharp angles, and the setback requirement would effectively make that property unrealistically developed at its highest density. Even though you may have zoned it R4, in reality, looking at the plot itself, I don't think it could be unless you were going multi-story high. So in my opinion, and in the reality of it, that R4 is just a name and not what's really out there. One of my major concerns is you're tying the proposed property into an existing sewer system in Sunny Slopes. Does that existing sewer system allow for future expansion of an R4 zone and density to cover that area? The reason why it's being funneled to Sunny Slopes is it goes downhill. The same reason why there's a major concern about surface water. I've seen homes with flooded backyards. If you add more pavement up on a higher level, you're going to see a lot more water in Sunny Slopes.
Maybe just to clarify so everybody understands, whenever a project is approved, you know, this is just a zoning discussion. It goes through engineering for stormwater and sewer management, and both of those conditions have to be met. Sometimes that means new pump stations, lift stations. Sometimes it means it can't be approved because it's simply not adequate. So this isn't where that's addressed, but it is addressed regardless of what happens, and that's not a statement for or against, but really just an informational thing that the city actually has a process that's designed to make sure hopefully those things don't happen regardless of what goes on.
Okay, I want to talk about reality.
No,
I am the
understand.
owner of Evergreen Terrace Apartments. I have 200 units up on Ashley Road, and we were required to put storm retention. And yet every time when there's a major rain, cars get flooded on city streets. Now that's the reality of it. And that's what I'm trying to impress upon you all, is yes, you can have these catch basins, but I can tell you right now, they don't always work. If you go back and look in your police records, you'll see that Ashley Road gets flooded quite often every year.
Apologize.
I'm not
You
questioning.
probably understand the process better than I do. I just wanted to bring up that it is something that's evaluated. It's
I know.
not that it's not looked at.
I know.
So
I know
please
that
continue.
it is. Another question I have is, what lot size are you creating here in a neighborhood that has 15,000 square foot lots? What price of living units, single-family homes with 0 lot lines, are you creating against subdivisions and homes that have large lots? Are you effectively trying to spot zone a high density into a surrounding area of R1 and R2? I don't think that's good design. At my age, I have to look at my notes. Forgive
Well,
me.
I'm making notes of what you say.
Okay.
So we're doing fine.
The buffer that's proposed for this property is either 10 or 15 feet, if I understand correctly. What's the setback on a house lot in an R2 inside the city?
Well, let's not debate that question. If
No,
you'd
no,
like to
I'm
talk
not
to us
asking a
more
debate.
about
I'm
something,
asking
please
for
go
a fact,
ahead.
what is the setback?
I can't give you that information right now. Asong, this is not the place to do that.
Okay.
Please give us your comments for and
Okay.
against.
Would you please compare that setback requirement to what they're proposing for a buffer? And realize that that is not much of a buffer if there is one at all.
Those things are developers' project concerns, and they have to meet that and develop it and decide if it's going to function in the process. That's why we have the regulations. Exactly right. But
So in
that's not what
essence-
we're determining.
But the
tonight.
reality of it is, you're putting another house up against another house.
Right. That's because of the R4 density, which is what we're talking about, the types of zoning that allows for whatever in the setbacks. That's what we're talking about. If I can get you to go ahead and keep your comments down to a condensed level so that we can go ahead and allow others to
Okay.
speak, that would be great.
Has there been any kind of economic study calculating what the decreased value of these homes in the surrounding area might be compared to the revenues, losses because of the decreased values?
Thank you for the question. We'll talk about
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caudill. We appreciate your time.
Mhm.
Anyone else wishing to go ahead and approach, we'd be glad to welcome you now.
My name is Stephen Jones. I live at 160 Sunset Circle. I disagree with just about everything they say. My big problem is the R4. You're going to squash a lot in there. And if you give them the opportunity to do it, they will do it. Not saying this man's going to sit here and lie to us, but why does it have to be R4? Because like Ed old boy said, that pie-shaped wedge there, you ain't getting much in there unless you're going up on the top of each other. So just against it. Thank you.
Much. That was clear and concise. Next.
Hi there. Thanks for your time. I'm
Yes,
Brad
sir.
Reed. I live on 146 Park Drive.
It was Brad Reed?
Brad
Yes, sir.
Reed.
Thank you.
Just a couple of concerns with just the R4 zoning. I won't rehash what's been said, but with that zoning, West Market is becoming pretty dense with a lot of walkers, pedestrians trying to get to and from bus stops. There's 6 bus stops beyond the gas station, the Roadrunner Market, before you get to the city limit sign. There's 6 bus stops and no real sidewalk. The sidewalk ends at the gas station. So there's a lot of people in the mornings walking up and down that road trying to get to those 6 bus stops. Not school bus stops per se. There's there, plus there are city bus stops that go out to, I think it was Mayfair Drive, Wayfield Drive, where the old bakery used to be. And another thing is on Friday nights for about 6 months of the year, the Midway Ruritan has a community outreach turkey shoot where they shoot shotguns on Friday evenings on that ball field there. So that would probably be something that would have to cease if there were condos on that property.
Well, it's funny, I drove by there about a week ago, and I was wondering what their backstop was for the turkey shoot. I was like, I drove all the way through there, I was like,
it's
there's
gravity in the
homes
woods.
every which
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. But it goes from October through March every year.
Can't stay in the house.
So, thank you.
All right. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against?
I have one really brief comment, and y'all can clap when you want to. My name's Beth Talley. My problem is the amount of vehicles that are going to be on that road and surrounding road, because apparently we also have a proposed subdivision that's going to be coming from Green Pond Road the other direction, and it is going to be packed with cars, and I don't think either one of those roads can handle the traffic that this is going to incur.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your
Hang
time,
on
and we will
one
not clap.
second, ma'am. Nicole, did you get an address from her?
No.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're not done.
111 Sunset Circle, Sunset.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. Next.
I'm Jerry Sue Bowers. I live at 123 Sunset Circle. We moved from Carter Crossing because those were single-family dwellings, and after we had been there several years, it turned into rental hell. Everything was rented. It was college students and everything. So we find this nice, quiet subdivision, nice house, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. We're happy. And we've already get traffic cutting through from Matson over to Old Jonesboro. And I'm afraid that's going to create more traffic. Then what's to stop, if we leave this R4, this property that's all these lovely woods and everything, what's to stop that to be annexed and developed into R4? And then that's going to impact my property too. I mean, I bought a bigger house, spent more money, and I pay a lot in taxes. And, this is just going to really hurt the value of our home. So that's what's concerning me.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
How you doing?
Yeah, doing great.
My name is Jerry Lucas. I live on 129 Sunset Circle. Excuse me, I just had some surgery done on. I echo everything the people in our community have said. And the traffic is going to be totally horrendous if you add more houses in that development. It is kind of really, it's ridiculous to even add anything else in that community. It's a quiet community, the good people in it, but there's no way we can take on any more traffic in that area. Now, thank you for your time.
Appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? If you don't mind giving us your name again, Mr.
Yes,
Landy.
it is Scott Landy. I'm the owner and
We
potential
will, given
developer,
the
I
time
hope.
that's been dedicated, I will, at the chairman's
I appreciate it.
prerogative,
That's
allow
nice.
for that,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Understanding the different zoning that is out in that area, I would consider R3 zoning, and to me, that would be a nice way from going from R2 to R3 and to R4. Up the road a little ways is an RP3 zoning already. Like I mentioned, that would be, I think, appropriate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you listening, obviously. Okay, anybody else here wishing to speak?
Luke Whitson, I live at 141 Sunny Slope Drive. I don't have a problem. I mean, I pay taxes just like everybody here. I've lived in Sunny Slope probably 24, 25 years.
Yes, sir.
Children growing up in there. Very nice, quiet neighborhood. Maybe every once in a while you have a speeder come through, but, just going back and forth. But it's a good neighborhood. Just about every house in the whole Sunny Slopes, and that's all I can, reference to, is on about an acre lot. If Mr. Landy, if he's got 6 acres, why not 6 houses, and let it go, and be happy with it. 1 acre per house, but I don't agree with the 60 at all. I feel sorry for my neighbors that are bordering this property, because I have the same thing on the west side of my property that's going to happen sooner or later. And I'm looking at the same thing my neighbors are looking at now, but it's probably going to be down the road. But I don't agree with the 60 dwelling or even a 42 dwelling. It just seems like it always brings other stuff coming that it's never good.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Is anybody else here wishing to speak for or against? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Becky Momini. I live at 146 Silver Maple Drive. I've been there since 2002. The reason that I moved into that neighborhood where my children were elementary school, middle school age at that time. It is a family neighborhood. It is a quiet neighborhood. As my neighbor mentioned, they ride their bikes. They can be out of the parent's sight for a few moments and you don't panic because we know our neighbors. We all know each other. That is one concern. We have peaceful enjoyment in our neighborhood, and that is a concern that I'm afraid will go away with this development. The other thing is the stormwater runoff. We do have runoff in our neighborhood. It comes down. I am to the south and at a lower elevation than this proposed property. With everything that the city has already put in place, we're having wetter and wetter seasons than we've ever had. So what is there is already not taking care of what our problem is. I suspect this will make it worse. So everything else that everyone mentioned, the transiency of the neighborhood, proposed neighborhood, but I would respectfully request that you deny the R4 or R3 annexation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That was Becky. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against?
Hi, my name is Jonathan Landy, son of the existing owner. I grew up in Carter Crossing, spent plenty of time in Sunny Slopes, and in fact, my uncle lived in the Triangle area that's currently zoned for R4 before he passed away, and just want to assure folks that the current owner and potential developer will take, extreme care to make sure that whatever product is out there is done at the highest quality and certainly beneficial for the community and for the city. So I just want to voice my opinion for all three motions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anyone else here wishing to speak? All right, thank you all for coming, and seeing that, I'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of our hearing tonight, and we'll move on for deliberation and consideration on the commission. I'm going to sum quickly what we heard, just for the commission, and then allow for everyone to discuss. There are some considerations as why. We'll talk about for and against. It's a reasonable way of looking at it. Things why you might consider a higher density zoning here would be things that this is on an arterial street. That would be one issue. The Midway transition from Midway Industries there. The fact, potential proximity to RP3 or other zoned parking lots, and the character of the lot, how developable, how well can it be developed where it is. But there are a lot of other questions here against, and that would be number one. What's the character of the neighborhood? We have R4 next door, but it's functioning as R1, essentially, maybe R2. So character of the neighborhood, property value impacts are a concern. Infrastructure was something that was brought up that is evaluated, looked at in other areas. But then finally, density. So we look at transition zones in the Planning Commission from higher used areas, higher impact areas to lower impact areas, and we tend to ratchet down the density. At first, R4 next to R4 sounds really good, but it's really functioning as R1. So what we end up with is an R4 development right in the backyard of an R1 development, even on an arterial street that, strangely enough, is functioning more as an R1 along the way. So those were my concerns, just looking at it, understanding the character. I guess if I had a question anywhere, my personal opinion was that R4 seems a little higher density. I did have a question for A-Song, if you don't mind, in the nature of summing that up. Can you give us a quick rundown on the transition from, say, an R2 to R3, how that might contrast with R4 in this area, or in any area,
The R1 and R2 zoning districts, which is this Sunny Slope subdivision, is essentially R2 zoning district, will permit minimum 15,000 square foot lots on homes on individual lots. So minimum, the lots will have to be a minimum lot size 15,000 square feet. and the homes have to be on the individual lots.
And that's presently what Sunnyside is zoned
That is,
today.
yes, that's presently what Sunny Slopes. Sunny Slopes.
Yeah.
That's presently what Sunny Slopes has. Now, a development on this piece of property will not connect to Sunny Slope. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. How are you going to connect to Sunny Slope? It doesn't make any sense. The only way to get into this property and get out will be through West Walnut. So in terms of traffic and other interactions with this Sunny Slopes neighborhood, that is, except there is some very specific reason that's taking somebody out there. But if you have people doing business inside the city or in Jonesboro, you wouldn't have people driving down in here to go that way. Old Jonesboro Highway does not function as a local street within the neighborhood. It essentially connects traffic between two cities or two towns, Jonesboro and Johnson City. A lot of the traffic on that way is either people going to Jonesboro, going to Johnson City, or they went to Johnson City and then they're coming into the neighborhoods that adjoin West Walnut District. So traffic on West Walnut District does not dead end on West Walnut Street, basically. In terms of the R4 zoning district can permit up to 14 dwelling units per acre. The R3 zoning district permits up to 7 dwelling units per acre.
How many acres is 15,000 square feet?
Well, you're right.
We've done this before, but I can't stand that square feet thing. I cannot wrap my head around it. I'm looking at acres.
This piece of property, I'll get down to those numbers for you.
Is what?
This piece of property under consideration is 6.251 acres, which is 272,250 square feet. Even if you were to zone it R2, which is the same zoning district of Sunny Slopes, he will be permitted up to 18 to 19 houses.
Okay.
On the side. So it will not be one house, and it will not be 6 houses. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. 15,000 square feet is 0.34 acres.
Thank you. Good job, Alex. Now I will have that in my head forever for R2. This is
So that is what we will have out there.
While we're on that topic, minimum lot sizes with RP3, there are no minimum lot sizes. It's only density per acre, correct?
RP3 has a minimum lot size, and I think that is 6,000 or 4,000 square feet.
Yeah, I think it's
4,000 square feet. Can please quickly check that for me?
So 18 to 19 homes at R2, R3, 7 per acre.
Per acre, he can have up to 43 dwelling units in
With the
the
restriction, there's 4,000 square foot lot sizes, because you have to set aside for infrastructure and roads. and-
Well, we're crisscrossing zoning districts. The R2 is what Hassan was just talking about. The R3 is not the same as RP3.
Yeah, exactly.
RP3 is what is up there in the corner. That's what was the Green Pond annexation. RP3 actually is more intensive than the R3. The RP3 allows 4,000 square foot lots and a density of 8.5 units per acre. The R3 is larger lots, but 7 units per acre. So the offset, the reason why the RP3 allows smaller lots and a higher density, a 1.5 unit per acre increase in density, is because it involves more design. It gets into more specifics on what and how the design of the development can occur. It's got a mandatory concept plan that has to come through here and go through city commission. The R3 has less design restrictions, less design considerations.
Planned. Right. So, thank you.
In the RP3, for example, you will have to have minimum 15% of the entire property will have to be open space, just as part of the design. element that we're talking about, which you don't have in an R3 scenario.
But that is something that staff could help the petitioner with if he were to be looking at different options that are less dense than R4. You could look at R3, RP3, and
As
see
the
what you
petitioner
have.
has stated that
Or an
he's okay with an R3. Yeah. So,
yes, thanks. We just wanted to, I wanted to just compare and contrast the 2, 3, and 4, and just to understand what the difference was and what we're looking for. I think
the 4 would take far more density, and even within that R3, you still have the elements of your setbacks, and that will come into play and kind of squeeze you down. You still have to control for stormwater, that is going to squeeze it down. Detention facilities you'll have to provide on the side. Parking, whether it go through a driveway, you have 24 feet wide, all of that. So it's there are elements in the site design that you just can't make the entire property houses.
exactly. You got to fit it on the land.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
could, Hassan, will you also make note to the commission the idea, or not the idea, but to address the concern of height that had been mentioned in terms of stacking units? And I believe that 35 is the max for all these districts we've been talking about.
Yes. So he can just go building 6-story buildings. No, it can happen.
Very
So
good.
35 is essentially 3 stories.
3 stories at most, essentially.
Thank you.
And I guess one more question. Hassan, the R3s that are already here, I guess in the
The
southwest.
nearest R3 that we have is in this area. It's on this road. That is sort of
Is that functioning as an R3 or?
It's functioning as an R3. It's actually got about 36 units on it right there. So,
Corner from it. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you,
So-
Hassan.
Would you mind making that map a little smaller
And-
so we can
and
see more
that
of
is-
the surrounding?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Would you mind
Zooming out.
zooming out and letting us see more of the surrounding areas and the zoning? No,
And
just-
this, from this to there is 0.3 miles. Right there is the Midway Center. Anything here not in color is in the county. So this is a church, I believe. There's a church. I think there's a Baptist church. We come down this way. This is where we had the Beechwood Meadows plat discussion that was right here. Out here, you start having, that's all multi-family developments along that road.
And that was a mile, I believe.
Yeah, this,
29 miles from that R3 to the.
yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
That's almost, that is RP4. And it is, that one is packed. That is like a mobile home park. That's an RM district. That's a mobile home park. And then this is kind of a neighborhood business district area. There's a gas station right here.
Did you see any more?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Further discussion on the commission or motions?
I have a question. Since the applicant has stated that he would agree to R3 zoning, even though the request was for R4 zoning, can we just move, if somebody desired, to approve R3 zoning, or does that need to,
Preston?
does there need to be a separate request from the
My-
applicant since we're coming into annexation issues?
The property owner is the applicant,
Right,
and it is that property owner who has spoken here.
okay.
So he's the property owner. So you could get that in the record. If you were some other person, you couldn't do that. He would have to be the property owner. But since he's the property owner himself, you can get that into the
But
record.
we could approve R3.
You could approve R3, yes.
Is that,
I guess, in listening to everybody, and I know there's probably not a requirement for the owner to meet with the residents, but it seems like to me, a lot of issues could have been resolved and talked about before this came before this commission. there's a lot of people out here with a lot of concerns, and I would have thought the owner could have come together with the residents, even though I understand what Asong's saying, there's not a direct connection between one subdivision and that, but still, that property backs up to their residence. I understand that.
Well, you bring up a good point, because there was a question, a comment, that as if we require people to have community meetings, and there are conditions where we require people to do that. But in a rezoning request like this, an annexation, is there any such ordinance for which would have teeth that we would even begin to say, yes, the city has this set out that you have to meet with the community? I don't think we have that for rezoning requests. We have posted notification, but there's no meeting questions.
We don't have any meeting requirement
Development, certain
for
site
an
plans and things like
annexation.
that. Right,
There's no
exactly.
meeting requirement
So
for
there's-
that. But we put out signs on the property, notify the neighborhood. We send letters to, adjoining properties. And then when this goes to city commission, you also have notices that are put in the newspaper.
That's not in the authority of this city to do that. So,
But I would have
which
thought
is-
it would be in the best interest of all parties.
No, I didn't say it wouldn't be a good idea,
I
just in
mean,
the authority of this.
regardless of the requirement, we've got a lot of residents in that subdivision
Right.
who have a lot of concerns, and maybe they could have come to some kind of agreement before the applicant submitted the application.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, I hate to see situations where people are concerned. Changing on the fly to an R3 request, if the property owner requests an R3 zone, I don't know that I've seen that before, but if we do have the applicant here, does the city have any questions or concerns with that process or procedure taking place?
Well, Hassan had addressed that since that comment was made directly by the applicant, who is the property owner, that could happen.
I have a mindset that we've deliberated R4 all night, and everybody's had a chance to think about R4 and understand what that means. My concern might be that not everybody's had a chance to think about what R3 means for them tonight, and that it might be reasonable to go through that process where everybody understands it and has a chance to digest it and think about it well. And, things like what you said, get together and then come back with a better feel of it, and that it's not rushed. I mean, that's my concern, that it would be a rushed decision and that people didn't have a chance to sort of digest it and think about it.
And I think, and listen to what Asong said about the difference between R3 and R4 isn't, to me, that much of a difference. Would be to these people. I think, personally, we should defer this so this can be discussed further.
I think I would be considering even that we deny the R4 because we feel like it's out of character. I wouldn't have, and then let them go back to the drawing board and come back with what works best with the community and with everyone else. And I think that's my personal take on that. It's not a motion. It's just a discussion.
Can I make a motion?
Yes, sir.
Make a motion to deny the current proposal
Okay,
of R4.
We have a motion?
I second that.
A motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion or
Do
question?
we have to, since an approval would have required three different motions, one for annexation, one for the zoning, and one for plan of services, is it possible for us to approve the annexation without approving the zoning or plan of services? Or must we deny all three or approve all three, is my question.
The three are interrelated, especially the second and the third, which is a plan of services and the zoning assignment.
Correct.
Zoning is a service. So that's why if you look at a plan of services, one of the elements there is the zoning. If you were, for example, to approve an R3 zone, then the plan of services will have to be amended to read R3 instead of R4. And you cannot annex a property and not give it a zoning district. So the three, although they're separate in motions, they are interrelated.
That's why I've always wondered why we started doing them as separate motions, because there's so much the same thing.
Well, the differences, there are differences in them. You could decide, for example, in a case like this, you could say,
I didn't mean to get on rabbit trail. I'm sorry. Go ahead. We can talk about that later. Go ahead.
That's all right, sir.
Let's stay on task. I apologize.
In a case like this, you could have annex or not, which is incorporated into the city or not. Yes. Zone, instead of R4 requested R3. So you have two different motions in that case. You could look at a plan of services and say, well, school district, you don't have the buses. So we're going to change the date that school district will begin to apply to this from 2019 to 2020. So there is room on each of these elements of changes to be made.
You could do all that in one motion, too.
Okay, so the current motion that is on the table is to what?
The current motion is to deny the request, yes.
Deny the request altogether?
Yes.
And if the request is denied, where does that leave the applicant? Does the applicant then have the right to come back to us a month from now with a new proposal?
Well, that's a good
Or-
question, because
Yeah.
there may be.
What does it do to the applicant?
You can't come back for the same zoning request, but you can come back for another. But if we defer it, can he alter it without having to start a whole new application and fees process?
Because this is, for annexation, we don't have fees. So
Okay.
there's no fees for review of annexation request. There was another question on,
If we defer it.
if you defer, he doesn't, you don't have the zoning clock. That clock sets in when you're doing a rezoning, when the property is already inside the city and you're just changing the zone. Then you have that 6 months that he has to work on. In this particular case, you don't have that. The applicant could come in next month with R3 zoning, for example. He can do that.
So would it behoove us to ask the applicant his preference? Because it appears to me that if we vote on the current motion, the motion is to deny, or we could have, that motion could not pass and we could defer.
I say we do that out of expedience and respect. Mr. Landy, would you care if it was deferred and you had time to talk it over with staff and work through that process? Okay. But we have a motion and a second to deny if we need to talk about that in a moment. So, yes, sir.
Is there a difference in deferring versus allowing him to pull his request? Is there anything that makes a difference in those two environments?
In terms of procedure, yes. If you defer, you have to provide the date that you can say, I defer this to next month. So the next month you will have to hear it. But if he withdraws it, then he simply brings it back whenever he feels that he is okay, if he's comfortable bringing it back to you for consideration.
If we deny it.
Or if he pulls it.
If he withdraws it.
If he withdraws it.
If he withdraws it, then he can bring it back whenever he feels comfortable. The applicant.
Right.
If you defer it, then you will say, we're deferring this up to this point. You have to specify some time frame.
You have a time frame.
You can't defer it.
Something to keep in mind is that even if the commission voted to deny, they still have a right to go on to the city commission. Because when somebody's petitioning to annex or they're petitioning to zone, they're not petitioning the advisory body, they're petitioning the deciding body.
Right.
And so you all would be making a recommendation, it would be a denial recommendation, so it wouldn't be a question of whether or not he'd have to reapply or anything. He could go on to city commission. I think that this has been a very healthy conversation. I think one thing I would consider is some of the things that you all talked about in terms of the pros in terms of the arterial roadway, no access to sunny slopes, some of those things. But I would also obviously consider the concerns of the neighborhood, and then also consider, which I believe you've done, the willingness of the applicant to work with these folks. And so you've got RP3, a large chunk of RP3 just across the road, which is even more intensive than the R3 that keeps being discussed. It just involves more design. And so everyone in the room may find some satisfaction if you were able to send this back for reconsideration by the applicant. I think you would be able to see some satisfaction both by the board and by the citizens.
So, I was just thinking from streamlining the process is if we don't deny it, but if we just defer it and let him go back for reconsideration, that it keeps the process alive and it makes it easier. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And of course, as he mentioned, he can decide to move forward to city commission.
Oh, they can always have the opportunity to appeal. We're not the final authority. We just serve at the pleasure of the commission, the city commission.
But just for clarification, it's not an appeal.
the
It's-
recommendation to the final judgment.
Right. You all are the advisory body, so if you recommend to deny or to approve, it's a recommendation to the city commission. They would not be appealing any kind of denial.
Thanks for the clarification. In previous lives, that was the language that was used for it.
Okay.
However, does it automatically go to the city commission?
It's obligated to.
It's obligated to.
In a denial?
Yes.
Because the way it functioned before, I mean, this body has functioned is it didn't go unless the applicant requested it to move on to the city commission.
Unless the applicant decides to pull it.
Right.
Unless the applicant decides that because the planning commission has recommended a denial, I'm going to stop the process. If he doesn't do that, we will have to put it on the city commission agenda for the city commission to make a decision on it. Permit me mention something with respect to the concerns, the R4, R3. R3, as we mentioned, is less, both in terms of entitlements, the different things you can never do on that side. They're far less than what you can do in an R4. So when it comes to the elements of design, that's something totally different from the question of what kind of density you use. For example, if you were to make that an ROP3, let's say you decided, okay, the guy next door is ROP3, I'm going to make this ROP3. He has an entitlement for an ROP3 that is far more dense than an RO3. You may put in different designs there in terms of, okay, 15% of these has to be kept aside for open space. Maybe throw a trail in there. But that doesn't stop him, for example, from going higher. So the other concerns on stormwater, of course, those are things that will have to be handled inside the design process. As I listen to this, it seems that it's really coming down to a matter of the neighborhood wanting single-family residential development on individual lots that looks like what they have, and the developer wanting single-family residential development that has more of the character of a PUD. Fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. That's the difference. Is the neighborhood is wanting single-family development on individual lots, which is what they have, and the developer is wanting single-family development in PUD character, which is you still have single-family, but they are kind of abutting each other. That's the difference.
Question, binding site plans, does RP3 have a binding site plan or something like that?
The ROP3 has a binding site plan.
R3 does not.
The RO3 does not, but because it is an annexation request, he's not required to submit a binding concept plan. If you were rezoning it from RO4 to ROP3 or from B4 to ROP, then he will have to submit a binding concept. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So I think the mind of the city is somebody is outside of the city and is coming into the city. He has a bit of that relaxation in the rules, put it that way.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
One more question for Hassan. So even if they do, if in the future it was zoned R3, would they still butt each other, the homes, the single-family homes?
The single-family
R3
homes,
zoning?
it gets expensive from a building code perspective. When you put, let's say he could have,
I guess just for our own education, can you do a PUD with an R2? You cannot, can you?
in an RO2, no. A PUD, you can only begin from RO3.
Right.
So RO3 will be okay. This, let me see. Standing like this. On this side, this is six units touching each other. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you have one on this side, I don't have it on this picture, which is 8 touching each other. Now, if you start getting above that, you're going to get into some serious building codes issues. They start stepping in. So,
It sounds like the community is asking for, or almost this community is requesting an R2 zoning.
Mm-hmm. It sounds, listening from the community, it sounds to me that if you were to say this is the same thing that you have, which is R2 on individual lots, then they'll be fine with that. It seems. But when you get down to the use, which is, am I having a business here or am I having a single family here? You know, am I having an industry here or am I having a single family development here? It comes down, it all comes down to an element of design. If I go back to that factor of design, how do you want to design this? He wants to design it as a PUD development, which is single family homes, but you have some of the units touching each other, and then you have spaces in between some of them. Like this ends here, you have a space in between, and the other begins from here, while the neighborhood has individual lots. And if you were to of course, if you were in the way of subdivision, you still have to control for stormwater, you know, just as you will have to do for, but he will not have to provide things like buffer that will not be required.
We've had good discussion, and we're certainly here until we get it right. Does anybody have any further discussion or comments that they want to make on the commission? And we need to consider the motion that's on the floor, whether or not we want to continue and vote on that or pull it. And
That's just my concern, is whether we continue with the current motion or we move to defer.
well,
Or we
it's-
ask the applicant if he would prefer to withdraw it at this time.
from the standpoint of what we need to do parliamentarily, is we wanted to have discussion on this motion, which is what we've been doing. So the person who made the motion certainly has the right to withdraw it. And if you decide to withdraw it, that's fine. I'll ask you at this point if you want to. Does anybody want to?
I am willing to withdraw the motion, yes.
You wish to? Okay, so with the motion withdrawn, your consent, then we have no motions on the floor, and we can decide how we want to deal with it. So from a standpoint of how we want to deal with this now,
Should we not ask the owner his,
I think we can either pull, withdraw, or deny. Mr. Landy, would you prefer to have this withdrawn or?
Sounds better to defer something.
Deferred, okay.
But that puts him, you have to come back in a month, right?
Depends on
It
what
goes
about
back
time you
on the
provide.
agenda next
I'd
month.
like to get some assistance from the city, or we can maybe put together a meeting with the neighborhood
That'd be great.
during that timeframe.
We could defer for as long as we want. It's an indefinite deferral because there's no clock on this, correct?
There's no clock on this. You can simply defer
Exactly.
until.
And then when you're happy
you
with the
have-
discussions in the community, you can bring it back to us. We can defer.
So we need a motion to defer?
Yes, sir.
Can I make a motion to defer?
Yes, you may. We have a motion to
second
defer.
that motion.
A second from Mr. Williams. Do we have any further discussion? Question? Yes?
Are we
had
specifying
the
how
look.
long the deferral is for?
We can, we have not.
But we do not have to?
We
Is
do
that
not have
correct?
to on this one. There's no clock ticking on this. There are other things that we definitely have a clock ticking on.
So our understanding is if we defer, we just wait for the applicant to come back and say, I'd like you to reconsider.
Right, and I'd like to do that in a timely fashion within a couple of months.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Anybody-
We have a second?
We have a second.
We have a second, and so we're just discussing, because you had the look. Any further discussion from the commission? Any commission comments from staff at all, Mr. Mitchell?
Not at this time.
Thank you. All right, go ahead and call the roll, please.
Do we need to go through annexation deferral, plan of services deferral, and zoning deferral, all three separately?
Since it's a deferral, everything can just be
Can
bundled
refer it
into
all
one.
as agreed.
The entire thing gets
Okay.
deferred.
All right, thank you. All right. Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Chairman Zayons.
Yes.
Motion is deferred.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming tonight and working through the process with us. We appreciate the petitioner, especially yes, sir.
Another question. Will the planning department send out letters to everybody that knows the ones who did not get letters?
Have a discussion with Mr. Bernard here. He'll answer your question for you. He'll take you out here and help you out. All right, the next item on the agenda, I believe, is the consider the Sesquicentennial Legacy Project site plan. Does
Mr. Chair,
anybody need to
I'm
take a
sorry.
break?
Hang on, yeah, I'm sorry, that since Asan has been
Are
detained.
you the site plan person? Were you the legacy site plan person?
Yeah.
Let's take a break while you handle that and let everybody come back out. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
We are back, and we are back from our break, and we're ready to consider item number 5 on the agenda. Are we not back on yet? Tell me when. It's like, okay, when I see it up there, then I'm good.
She's ready.
We're on.
Yeah, okay, there we go. All right, item number 5, we are back from break. Item number 5 on our agenda is to consider the Sesquicentennial Legacy Project Site Plan. Mr. Bernard, it's a very quiet chamber now. It's all yours.
Thank you, sir. Chairman, Commissioners, before you is a request to consider the site plan for the city's sesquicentennial legacy project. This is out in Kings Common. The city went, bought these properties, tore them down, designed it, turned it into these King Commons for stormwater management. And as we get into the 150th year of the city, this is a public project. Johnson City will be redeveloping this site. This is in front of you because of mandatory referral under state law. You're not really making a final approval decision on it, but it must come before you to determine whether.
Well, we don't do that on anything.
Proving that
It needs to come before you. And that includes parks, streets, extension, I did mention, building new fire stations. Basically, if you're going to use taxpayers' money to build a project, the state says take that project to the Planning Commission to make an informed recommendation on it. Considering that it was these taxpayers that helped in designing the comprehensive plan, let them have the opportunity before the Planning Commission to have a voice. So this is basically the side. You have the history side. You have, Tennessee 3 stars, beautiful design. You have the nature park. This is in the B2 zoning district, the downtown area. This just helps to bring more tourism into downtown and recreational activities into downtown. One of the questions that we posed was, King Commons was designed to handle stormwater. Are we creating more impervious area with this design that's going to affect stormwater issues? No, this will be pervious pavers. So water will be able to seep through. It's not going to negatively affect stormwater in the city. It meets our zoning requirements, meets engineering design guideline standards, which are kind of incorporated into our sub-regs. Our comprehensive plan calls for expansion and modernization of, I hesitate to use the word park because in the city, this is not really a park legally. It's more of stormwater management infrastructure. So for the records, not a park. For the records, please. So
it's the park that's not a park. Got it.
It's a stormwater recreational area. It's a stormwater recreational area that we are modernizing and upgrading to provide more tourism into the city and provide greater room for recreation in our city. So the nature park area is going to be good for kids, pull more into downtown. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff?
I know about this.
Okay, I bet you do.
A lot. It's not a splash pad.
Not a splash pad. It's not a park and it's not a splash pad.
It's not a park, it's not a splash pad.
This is
And I imagine the next
ditch.
phase of this legacy project, this is a part of the legacy project. Wish I knew a pharmacist that knew about drugs. There's a natural adventure area does that also require coming back to the planning commission at some point in time, which is up to the right?
I think that's it on the right, isn't it, Larry?
I think that is
the left-hand sheet, the right-hand side of that is that
This is
park.
the nature
Yeah,
area.
there.
Yep.
There's actually 2 pieces.
There,
Is
yes,
that-
off to the right,
Yes.
in the schematic, yes.
Yes, it's all included in this. I just didn't have the isometric view for for
So-
that nature area. But all of that is
So we're approving
included.
that also?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and it is a public-private partnership, money being raised to offset some of the cost on this, and hopefully we'll
That's wonderful.
have it finished.
Wow.
Mr. Calhoun, do you know the timeline for this?
We're hoping that we have a ribbon cutting sometime in the fall, late fall, I think, for this piece of the Legacy project. It may be into 2020 for the natural adventure area. Still working on the design on that. But the design has been done here. Artwork in the middle has been approved by the Sesquicentennial Commission, and I think a contract is being let after approval by the City Commission on the 18th for the artwork. And then I think there's also a company that's already got the contract to build it. Ready for a motion?
Or discussion? Yes, motion?
Move to approve.
Oh, motion to
Second.
approve, and a second, done. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Yes. Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield.
Yes.
Commissioner Wild.
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson.
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun.
Yes.
And Chairman Zions.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Fantastic, thank you. Next item on the agenda will be item number 6, which is election of officers for the Planning Commission. So we have open the office of Chairman, Vice Chairman, Secretary, and Assistant Secretary. So we'll open up the discussion for the election of officers for Chairman.
You gonna slip, how you wanna do this?
Just
Private,
making
open?
motions? Yep.
We should start with
Nominate Chairman. Yes, start with Chairman, and then we'll work our way down. Yep, exactly. So
For
nominations for Chairman.
I'd like to make a nomination of Commissioner Zanuck to continue as chairperson.
Second.
I would accept if it was the pleasure of everyone, or the folks who want me to do it. I'd be glad to do it again.
To nominate, do we have to do one? Are we making motions, or are we just doing
They can nominate
nominations?
others too.
You
And
can
then,
nominate as many as you like,
Yep.
and then I will.
And then we call the roll and vote.
The first one, we'll vote, and then the second one and vote, and whoever gets the most votes.
Okay, I'd like
Yeah.
to nominate Commissioner Cooper for chair.
And I respectfully decline.
You.
So we won't vote.
Bob would do very well. Do we have any other nominations?
That's it for the nominations, then we vote.
All in favor? Hey, somebody else want to run that? I hate to run that myself. All right, all in favor? Aye, against? Okay. I'll be glad to continue in that capacity then. We need nominations for vice chair. And I've enjoyed serving with Bob, if you're willing to continue along.
I'm willing.
Okay, I'd nominate Bob to do vice chair.
Second.
Second. Any further nominations? All in favor? Aye. Okay. And secretary, looking for nominations for secretary at this point. And again, the secretary has to be available to come by and sign business hours, documents
Yes.
very frequently.
Yes, and in the event that they are out of town and not available, the assistant secretary would step into that role.
And that's how that works. They come by and sign them.
Who's the current secretary?
Paul.
And to read the minutes of the planning commission meetings. The secretary needs to read those minutes. When Nicole prepares them, sends them out, if the secretary, your signature is on those minutes. If they go to court, the judge will summon you in court. So the secretary, you have to read those minutes.
That's right.
Paul is good at reading the minutes. We like that. I would nominate Paul to continue if you would consider to do it.
now.
And I second it. All in favor? Give him a chance to turn it down.
You want to turn it down? Too late. Okay, we got a motion and a second for Paul. All in favor? Aye. All right. Last is assistant secretary.
And that's Who is that president?
Who is our president assistant secretary? Okay. Stacy, do you?
I nominate Stacy.
I second.
All right, all in favor? Okay, well, happy family, all right. So we have, moving on, then we need to move to the next item on the agenda, which is the appointment of members to the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission standing committees. We have 3 committees: the Legislative Review Committee, this is particularly for you guys, but also for me because I never can keep the name straight. Legislative Review Committee. We have a Long Range Planning Committee, and then the current Land Use Committee. This was something that we implemented with, at Preston's recommendation, that's working out well so that we can work through problems maybe a little more quickly and be a little more fleet of foot when it comes to new issues and make sure that things get done in a timely fashion. And then 3 people can get together and vet something really well rather than 10 people, because that's a lot of thoughts sometimes. And then we can bring it to the whole commission. We can all think about it. Although these committees meet on particular issues, anybody's available to come to their meetings and talk about it. Like Stacy said earlier, she wanted to be present for other issues that are, going on in another committee. Absolutely. But that's how these things work. Legislative Review Committee, we have an opening right now on Long Range Planning Committee and current land use. That's what we have openings for.
Fight amongst yourselves.
So
Fight amongst yourselves.
Yes.
Tell us your decision.
Asong, do you want to describe the difference of the 3 just for our new folks and also to refresh our minds, the difference between legislative review, which just looking at ordinances, right? I'll let you talk about the 3 briefly because I'm sure everybody's ready to go home.
Thank you. The Legislative and Policy Committee, Standing Committee, essentially looks at the regulations governing the stuff that the Planning Commission considers, which are basically 3: the subdivision regulations, the zoning ordinance, and also the bylaws of the Planning Commission. If there are procedural elements that we need to cover in the bylaws of the Planning Commission, they are like the front guards, to look at that. When staff proposes any language, or Board of Zoning Appeals can also look at certain things in the zoning code and say, this just doesn't make sense, because they have the powers to interpret. And there may be certain sections in the code that are lending itself to all kinds of confusion. And they want to sit down and have, instead of meeting with the entire planning commission, they meet with that small committee and come out with a language that is acceptable for everybody and for the city. And then the subdivision regulations. So that's essentially what the legislative committee do. They're really about policy and laws. The long range is like a copy of the plans that you have. That's long range. 20 years from today, where do we want to be? Whether it's neighborhood, corridor, we're doing the West Walnut District. You can have certain corridor plans, neighborhood plans, and it's important that if you're going to be asking the question, where do we want to be 15 years, 20 years, 30 years from today? That is a question. That is a question for long range committee to look at. And they may not look at the entire plan. Especially at this moment, we have a plan that is already adopted, and then as you are looking at specific projects, there may be policies in that plan that just are not working as you're applying, and that committee may want to pull aside and look at that particular policy, that was adopted inside a comprehensive plan. It may be a map issue, and they have to pull back and say, okay, in the comprehensive plan, long-range plan map, we said we want this area to develop in this part to maybe residential, but things are not going that way. Maybe we need to reconsider that. They will initiate that discussion and have it going, and then eventually bring it in front of the Planning Commission for adoption. And then the current land use and transportation, those are things of your housing, development of neighborhoods, questions like the ones we had today, Sunny Slope neighborhood, how do we want this to look like, other kind of questions that falls within current land use and transportation, traffic on the streets, stormwater issues, how does that look like, utilities, if we want to grow into a particular area, do we even have the utilities to develop in that area? So the issue we've been dealing with, should it be driveways or should we have streets, private streets, public streets? How should they look like? What kind of design? That's for the current Land Use and Transportation Committee to look
at. Very good, thank you. So understand that we have long-range planning that's open in current land use.
Are there any members moving around committees, or everyone's staying put, I assume?
It's been such a new thing. It's only been
We only did it like 2
that
months
we
ago.
really
Functional so far.
Yeah.
So it's set in stone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They left 2 seats
And-
open, by the way.
Yeah, it's nice.
That's right. So, do either one of you have a desire for one or the other? That's how when we first named these just a very few months ago, was really, hey, what are you interested in? So, long-range planning or current land use plan?
I think Chris had an interest in
Long-range planning for me would be
Yeah,
my
okay.
preference.
Well, if you are okay with the current land use, then that's fantastic. So we have that decided. We will appoint Chris to the long-range planning, and Commissioner Dagenhart will come on over to current land use. That's what we'll do. Thank you very much. I wanted to say I was driving around Blowing Rock this last week, Preston, and I thought it was really interesting. You know, we're looking at the new ordinances for how we're going to handle all the poles and all the wires coming out of them. They apparently haven't done a really great job with that yet. There are poles there with antennas and wires flying everywhere. Just ugly. You go about 6 blocks and there's another one. It looks like somebody put horrible antennas up there and just vomited wires out of them. So I thought, I'm glad you're in the game with that. It really looked good. So kudos to everybody.
So poles with nothing but cell phone
Yes.
antennas on them?
Nothing else on it. It was just a pole with cell phone antennas and then just tons of cables plugging into it and stuff. None of it camouflaged or hidden. It was ugly. That's a beautiful area. I thought, what a tragedy.
It is.
That is a tragedy. All right, is I have a motion to close the meeting?
So move.
No,
Was it moved, second?
no.
Almost.
Not yet.
You had a veto.
Oh, no, sorry. Hassan has something for you, Mr. Chair. There is something that, I wanted to be able to start here in Johnson City. It was something that I had done at my previous location to honor the chair who served each year. So you've just been reelected, but you have served previously in that capacity, so it is deserved, and we appreciate it. I asked Nicole to work with these folks, and she and them designed a very nice plaque, and so wanted to present that to you today.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you all. Appreciate vote of confidence to be back, too. So,
In recognition of your excellent leadership and dedication as chairman for the past 3 years, Dr. Tim Zhang. When I first came to Johnson City, I used to call it Zajong. It took me time to
a lot of people still do.
City of Johnson City Regional Planning Commission 2019. And you got a gavel on it.
Wow.
So you get another one next year? If he does a good job.
Thank y'all very much.
You would have gotten that if you became chair.
Sorry. All right, motion to.
I will hush now.
Thank you very much. And adjourn.